Hey guys, it's your coach Eero here. So I want to talk about today about flowing, about my own personal flowing practices, kind of answer some of the questions that I get from flowing, like do I listen to music when I do this, and just give you some tips on this, how to start flowing, because I think it's something that many people maybe shy away from a little bit because it's very free and it's kind of dance-like. So I just want to give you some ideas of how I, do these flows, how I prepare for them, and kind of how do I create them anyway. First I want to make you think a little. So have you ever had this sort of experience when you're just walking, you're normally walking, and then you notice that, or you feel like you actually don't know how to walk anymore? I know it sounds pretty weird. So you're just walking normally and you just feel like suddenly like, I don't really know how to walk. Wait a minute, what is going on? And you probably haven't had this experience. It sounds pretty weird, but from where it comes from, this experience, because I've had it, it actually comes from sort of questioning this sort of thing that has been so mundane and something you're so used to, this very everyday thing like walking, that you think is like sort of set in stone and you can't change it. But when you question this sort of pattern and you understand that maybe there are other ways of walking, like maybe the way that I'm walking isn't the only way that I could walk, and it creates a sort of situation where now suddenly there's a lot of potential. You can change actually the way you're doing. You can do little changes. Maybe I take a little longer step. Maybe I rotate my hip a little more. Maybe I don't shift my hips in some subtle ways a little bit when I walk. And you come to this sort of point where this is the reason why you feel like, wow, maybe I don't really know how to walk, even though you can of course go back to the default walking, right? But this sort of, I always got to this kind of experiences because I tended to question the ground beneath me, and sort of this way I was able to also evolve, because I tried to evolve my own movement, my own training and everything. I took this sort of approach, right? But why I'm explaining this is that when I ask people to do some sort of movement training, like let's say a bear walk, a crab walk, or whatever, basic monkey or like a monkey movement. So this puts people into the situation where they suddenly are in this position where most of the time when you're a complete beginner or just haven't done these movements, you're like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to really walk. And I think it's just this appreciation towards this sort of moment. It's a moment where you have broken this sort of automatic pattern or the kind of default setting, and you need to kind of figure out your own way of moving. Now there's nothing wrong starting with more mechanical movement. This is how in movement training exercise I'll show you the movements, the basic form of it, and then you can try to imitate it the best you can, but that's completely fine. This is how most people start. But movement training, the great thing about it is that it allows so much freedom for personal expression, and you can really put your own stamp on the movements. And I think this is where we are starting to approach the actual flow. So you can start with more mechanical things, but little by little, as you start to get that realization that I talk about, where you suddenly realize that I can't do it, feeling is the feeling of freedom actually, because you start to realize there isn't one right standard of how you should move. There's only worse and better ways, and some are more optimal for yourself and some are not. But you shouldn't be afraid to explore these movements. And even with these basic movements, I'm not going to come and with a ruler and try to measure the distance between your feet and arms, or try to tell you exactly where to put your arm and legs. There's always some level of freedom when we do this sort of movement drills, compared to some other exercises where I could be maybe more strict, because there could be a very specific goal with that exercise. But these movement drills, there's always the exploration is part of it in a way. So the actual flowing that I do, that anyone does, it consists of basically every sort of training that you have done in your past, which combines with this sort of momentary, the creativity that you have in the moment, the mental state that you have in the moment. Because for example, I've done these different arts, different martial arts, taekwondo, capoeira, I've done ballet, and like break dance and so on and so on, this sort of movement arts and of my own strength training and everything, and the animal movements that I practiced, they combine in this flow, you know, in whatever manner I feel like doing them. But of course, you know, they're not always exactly what I've practiced beforehand. That's kind of the thing of the flow, that the movements change a little bit and they take some different forms than before. But it combines from all the movements and all the training that I've done in my past, while also, as I explained, you are in the moment, and in the moment there is that sort of unexpectedness and creativity, and also what is your current mental state that you're in, because this changes also everything. Like, how are you feeling? Really happy, or maybe you're a little bit more sad, or super energetic, or you might not have too much energy, but you can still flow. So this will change, you know, the whole mentality, and, you know, do you make more explosive movements for more slow movements, and so on and so on. So this is the basic setting, you know, everything that you practiced before, and just whatever creativity you have right now to kind of, it's about, you know, the adventurous, because when you create something in the moment, it's not going to be, you know, it shouldn't maybe look exactly what you've done before. There's always that like element of surprise when you are flowing, like really like just improvising in the moment. So when I film these flows that you see on this channel, I don't ever listen to music. It just, you know, just listen to some whatever weird inner rhythm that I have, testing out some rhythmic patterns just with my body, and just the feeling. Usually I use the mental state as a sort of, you know, in place of the music. So I just listen to the feeling that I have, or some emotions that I have, and those kind of create a certain rhythm and a pattern and spring, and just the whole spirit to the movement. You can, of course, you can listen to music if you want. I sometimes, you know, at my own place, you know, in my home, I do listen to some music. I move around, maybe dance around. This is fine. So you can do that. But I personally just kind of listen to some sort of inner rhythm whenever I film these things for the YouTube. And I also don't, you know, prepare. Usually I might have some movements in my mind that I want to focus on, but I don't like prepare, you know, I don't create a choreography of what I'm going to flow with. But I do have often like this theme. I might use a theme. I think this is fun. So you can, for example, today I'm going to do more like monkey movement based sort of flow session, or maybe I'm going to use more like stand-up motion. So I'm not going to be crawling on the ground. I'm just going to stay on my two legs or one leg. Or maybe like this one video on this channel, which was a flow that had like 3 basically movements. Well, actually just 2 movements. So it was the bear walk and the crab walk, and then the sort of third element was just transitioning between those 2 flows, 2 elements. And that just with those 2 flow movements, I was able to create a really fun flow that had actually a lot of variety. Because inside, like I was explaining, you know, one movement you can do it in so many ways, and there's so much more room for adjusting and exploration with just like one movement, like a bear walk. You can do a lot of different things with just one flow element, you know. But the idea is that you can collect these flow elements. You know, like in the movement techniques, there's like over 50 different flow movements, such as, you know, the animal movements combined from also like gymnastics or martial arts, and like yoga and so on and so on. So you can collect this sort of like vocabulary, and this is something that actually also helps with the flowing. Okay, so having you know, this some sort of idea of, you know, movements you've experienced, you've maybe practiced them separately beforehand. This really helps, you know. Also in the moment is nice, you know, there's some sort of like muscle memory or something for you to start creating this flow. So having a theme, you know, deciding maybe 1 or 2 movements where you focus on, and then, you know, having practiced these flow movements beforehand. This is very important. This really helps you to flow, so you don't have to, you know, start with like, in a way, with from zero. Although that's possible as well, and you can do that too. Then another thing that also does have a really big impact on my flowing and everything, like, is just, you know, the regular strength training as well. Mobility and strength training that I do, and flexibility training, is also something that allows or creates more potential for certain movements. Like this is, when I do, you know, some sort of foundational strength training, it changes the way my body usually moves, and through that mobility training and everything, that's also a little bit of like exploration. I found out new things. I found out where are the limits of my body, and how can I maybe push these limits further, how can I gain more range of motion. So I got this sort of thing is also very good preparation in getting to know your body, being more aware of your body, and then you can use that also, that added control, strength, mobility that came from this training in your flows as well. So I want to now also talk about the things that I think are maybe limiting, some limiting beliefs that people have about, you know, that keeps them from flowing very freely, and maybe keeps them from flowing at all. Like here, this sort of movement that I'm doing here, I was very tired. This kind of I'd already done plenty of flowing before this, and my body started to be really tired. And in a way, like at that point, I could have just been, well, you know, my body's tired and I'm out of breath, so why not stop? But I decided to continue, and I decided to make that sensation of tiredness that could have been the reason to stop, but instead I made that sensation of tiredness, I decided to express it in my flow. As you can see here, like what I'm doing is kind of like this, you know, jumping a little bit uncontrolled. I'm lying on the ground and shaking there and doing things that there are many. I know there would be many people who probably wouldn't consider this even a flow, and there are some people who just because they have this idea of what flow is supposed to be. It's always supposed to be super impressive stuff and super smooth motion, and all you can do is just like compare this thing to your idea that you have of flow. And this is a very limiting thing, I believe, because on a higher level, everything can become part of the flow. Like I could have simply stopped there, but I decided to express the tiredness and create movement from it, and just let it flow, like let it go, whatever comes from my body as I'm going through this sort of feeling and this emotion. And this is the result. So why I'm telling this to you is that the people who have these ideas of many times it's something like, you know, I'm so clumsy, or you know, the flow shouldn't look like this, and this doesn't belong to this flow. And you know, compared to that guy, I look so stiff. Like this is actually a very common thing. Like people compare to other people, and well, my movement doesn't look like that guy, and it's so much more clumsier, and so on and so on. And everything that you feel as a reason that you shouldn't do, or maybe you should stop, can be actually just like a great way, actually the opposite thing. Like you can use it for a flow. You can make clumsiness in a flow. You can make falling to a flow. You can make everything in that moment as a part of it. This is the very freeing sort of mental state where we understand like this sort of uniqueness, how you can express anything in that moment with your movement, any sort of feeling. There's no limits, literally. And when we go back to that sort of feeling that I was trying to like describe at the start with this walking example, which by the way is real. Like I've really gone through like multiple times that just feeling it's odd to explain it, but like I don't know how to walk anymore. That feeling, you know, that feeling that might maybe feel a little bit scary or uncomfortable, but for me it's just a moment that's filled with potential, and there's possibility for you to find ways of moving that are really great for you and do good for you and make you feel more energetic and more healthier as well. And so this is why, you know, I want to encourage, you know, people to flow so that they experience this freedom and limitlessness, which is not bound on having a specific mobility, as it is not bound on being in some ways smoother or smoother than other people or more skilled than other people. Like it doesn't rely on this, because there aren't any limits to how you can flow your body, how you can move around, and how you can explore it. This is the exploration, you know. And of course, you know, this like the movement training is just like normal movement training with this, you know, simple movement patterns is an excellent start. Like you don't have to immediately go all like modern dancer and do some odd weird movements or expressions. What you can do is just, you know, like in the movement training, you just follow those different like separate flow movements, practice them separate, maybe pick like 4 different movements and repeat those one after each other, and and little by little you start to find there's different transitions between these movements, and you just probably just feel like you want to start using more freedom. I think this is a point that comes to some people that just feel like they need to, they even want to, they don't want to hold, they want to be like bound to these sort of rules anymore so much. I think that one of the greatest things is also that there are a lot of people who also they don't enjoy that much like regular gym training. There's nothing wrong with that, but there are people that just they really don't want to do that. And the only idea that or alternative for them is like, well, I want to get in shape, so let's do some jogging and some stretching, like 10 minutes stretching after jogging. But there's like this movement training. It's such an amazing alternative that offers a lot more benefits than just going jogging around. Like movement training targets in a way your whole body in a very dynamic manner. And like I was explaining, like you're learning this new pattern, so you have to use a lot of like your brain and to learn these things, and you're actually learning very high level coordination at the same time, and body control in many different positions, multiple different positions and combinations of like positions of your arms and legs, and your core will be supporting also like in the obliques, and you might be crunching in some movements your back is more arched, your shoulders are going in different places. So this is one of the great things in movement training, that it sort of can automatically take you to many different like varieties of body postures, and this way works multiple different muscles, creating quite balanced results. Like I know there are some limits to movement training, because sometimes, as I said, people tend to move in ways that are easier for them. But when you have like this multiple different movements that you can see, like the flow elements of movement 20xx, like, and you try them different out, it's kind of going to make you go into these positions where it's hard anyway. And at the start, just like anything is almost hard, you don't have to really try to make it hard. Just try a basic bear walk and it will be relatively challenging. And as a result of like working on muscles in this sort of dynamic way, you're going to build muscle mass first of all, and it's going to have a very different functionality than doing one-dimensional movements. And again, I'm not against one-dimensional movements at all. I use those a lot in my training, but still, this is something that lacks from many people, this sort of dynamic control that you can do in these flow-like movements, and creates a very different type of functionality in your body. And your body have more elasticity, there's more limberness, there's a lot of flexibility also involved, usually, especially with the posterior chain in these movements. And you learn a lot of supportive strength for your body. You can't do movement training unless you can really sort of float on top of your muscles and carry your body. And this is all something that can come from practicing movement training very consistently. Again, it doesn't come everything like immediately. You don't get these things. I think there are immediate effects, which is like improvement in your mood, just having a good feeling, and so on and so on. But little by little, your body will become much more stronger, much more agile as you start to keep on doing these movements. So I wanted to like really, encourage you and explain this sort of flowing, that is not, something very super mysterious and only reserved to some dancers and those who have the mobility and everything. Like flowing is something that everyone can do. Movement training is something everyone can do, and you can easily start from like the simple movements. And as I said, pick a few movements, pick yourself a theme that you want to maybe go, and then just trust whatever instincts or like whatever intuition you have at the moment. That's also what it is. Just not being afraid of like experiencing some new movements and doing something wrong. And this is the bigger point here. And one thing also, like remember, like you don't have to do flow to perform to people. Like you don't have to do it in thinking like you need to impress something. Like you can just do it for yourself, like in your own place, whatever you want. This is also very important, and you can still feel it. You start to really feel good about doing these movements. And I mentioned a couple of times like my own program, the Movement 20xx. which contains these like 50 different flow elements. It has also the mobility drills, it has strength drills, it has flexibility. Everything here that I kind of was explaining that can help you to create these flows is packed into this one really massive course. So if you kind of want someone to show you the way, this is, I think, really the best and easiest way to start, the Movement Twin XX. So you can visit that website, themovementtwinx.com, and see if it's something that you'd like to try out. But that's all for this video, guys, and I will see or talk to you in the next one. And go now and try some flowing. Alright guys, see you.